Hi, everybody. David Noor. I want to welcome you to another session of our revenues, relationships, and AI. We're really excited to transform 23 years of my work around relationship economics into the Avenir platform. If you haven't heard me talk about this, by the way, we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube and X, and delighted that we've got a great registration for today and hopefully a good audience. And you're welcome to jump in with your comments as we go through. I'll pause and make sure I address those. If you haven't heard me talk about this, one of the biggest challenges in helping global clients really embrace and implement relationship economics had always been, how do we operationalize this? How do we take this construct or framework you're trying to teach us and really implement it in our operations, kind of what we do and how we do it? In particular, professional service firms who, think about it a second, fundamentally sell relationships for a living, and they may or may not have a product where they push the button and the green light comes on, really need this idea of leading with the relationship first and bringing along their advice, their insights, their capabilities and competencies to really continue to develop the conditions of those clients. Really needed something, really, to stay top of mind, to become more intentional in the relationships they choose to invest in and nurture. And equally valuable, mid-market doesn't have the big brand names, doesn't have the big brand resources. So we've always believed relationships to be not only a strategic asset, but really an opportunity to level the playing field. Because if the big firms can build relationships, so can I with that buyer, and really set myself apart from a boutique standpoint. And many of the challenges we're going to talk about, I've faced, I've gone through. So the Avenir platform is built and focused on helping you become more intentional in the relationships you choose to focus, you choose to invest in. So in this series, we've been talking a lot about how do you turn your network into your biggest referral engine? How do you become more intentional about those relationships and nurturing those relationships? So in terms of agenda for today's session, I want to talk about mindset and specifically creating a competitive differentiation where the entire world, knowledge is getting democratized, right? So between AI and in-house capabilities, you've got to really think about what's our differentiation, what's our unique approach in how we go to market. I'm going to talk about strategic AI governance and really building some of those capabilities. I got to tell you, more executives I'm talking to, the more they're complaining that the promise of AI, these pilots and these initiatives that they've embarked on, hasn't delivered. And a lot of times it's becoming potentially a liability. So we're going to talk about the proliferation of AI right now without guardrails, and the challenge for many of these organizations, which we think is an opportunity for, again, if you're mid-market consulting, if you're providing advice, counsel, guidance, that could be a real opportunity. And then from a tool standpoint, I've always believed in what I call revenue resilience. How do you, as budgets get cut, as projects stall, how do you ensure that the relationships turn into net new revenue opportunities? And if we get time, if we get a chance, I'm also going to talk about this idea of return on your relationship investments. I think it's critical. If you believe the notion that relationships are investment, nobody makes that investment blindly. So how do you look for proactively a return on that investment? Just a quick recap. If you were able to join us in the last session, I brought up what holds back mid-market consulting growth from an individual standpoint at a director level or at a partner level. Heavily reliance on your individual networks versus how do I scale relationships. You've got inconsistent BD skills. You've got time starved for, growth activities. You're unsure of how to use AI for account insights or influence mapping. And then you still have very much that transactional mindset. From a practice leader or the executive committee, you've got misaligned growth versus your relationship strategies. There's inconsistent accountability. You've got a very fragmented view of relationships, almost myopic, if you will. You're underinvesting in enablement. And there's a lot of reactive versus proactive leadership when it comes to really nurturing strategic relationships. And then firm wide, if you think of brand, systems, culture, siloed practices, weak differentiation, which we're going to address today, poor relationship visibility, certainly not holistic, and everybody we know that account. Cultural is resistant or maybe resistant to AI, and you still have a lot of short-term orientation. And particularly with professional service firms, but much more broadly, we still believe CRM, we deeply believe CRM has forgotten the R. It's a, if you think of any of the popular platforms out there, they're not really relationship management environments. They're pipeline and forecasting and activity tracking. And very few people I know get excited about becoming data entry people. So how do we start? How can we extract relationship insights? And this isn't just my opinion. EPSTA does this global B2B sales benchmark, and B2B selling state isn't good. You've got win rates that are lower. You've got sales cycles that are, still struggling. Yeah, we're going after larger deal value, but when a lot of people are missing their quotas, missing their targets, it causes consternation. And the same research shows at the center the DNA of top performing teams is predicated in these 4 buckets: selling skills, time management, pipeline management, and relationships. And think about it a second. AI is already addressing the other 3, right? There's a lot of tools that are automating a lot of that functionality. We believe in that bottom right bucket, there's 2 ways to go. Either AI becomes Terminator, where I don't need you, right? And it absolutely eliminates. The quiet part that nobody wants to talk about is AI is going to eliminate a lot of current mundane jobs. Or it becomes Iron Man, where it makes you better. What's the old meme? Hey, Chat GPT, can you finish building that building for me? No, it can't. And we believe it's not going to replace you and I meeting in person and shaking hands and really nurturing a trusting relationship. As such, we're trying to enable, we're trying to empower that. So in terms of this session and the focus on how mid-market consulting or mid-market companies can really differentiate themselves, make no mistake about it, knowledge is getting democratized. So if you think about it a second, the reason this matters is AI and in-house teams, right? In-house expertise is really weakening this, what we call, what is known as knowledge arbitrage, right? We know stuff you don't. That is getting weakened, right? The clients are becoming more capable. So particularly mid-market firms have to find a way to differentiate not just what they know, because I can figure that out, but how they deliver, who they're connected with, and why clients feel safer or more trusted in working with them. You do that, that's what begins to separate you. That's the answer to, well, we've got AI and we've got pretty sharp people inside. Why do I need you? How do I benefit from working with you? So if you think about it, if you can start to, and yet that has to happen now if you haven't already, reframe your value from most consulting firms. Most people that walk in are advice providers. Well, I don't need that advice. What I need is you to be a trusted ecosystem partner, or you ideally bring relational advantage and help me as the client create a differentiation in my world because of the relationships you bring. I'm going to talk about our Relationship Economics Summit this October. This is our 4th one. And I love bringing executives from very different industries together to share their challenges and opportunities, many of which would never meet each other because the cybersecurity guys have no reason potentially talk to travel or manufacturing or global supply chain people, right? So this idea of a relationship advantage creator, we believe, is a great opportunity to reframe your value. Showcasing models. For our Atlanta breakfast areas, I've invited Eric McCarthy, longtime friend, former Coke executive, and now a VC private equity partner. And what you want to do is you want to showcase models where you partner with a client, and specifically a client's internal team. I wrote a book on this, to co-create a solution versus the outsource thinking. The days of any of us having all the answers are over. So if you can bring a unique value add and co-create that solution with someone, especially a client's internal team, you become an enabler of their success. And what happens is, if you use relationship intelligence, that's in essence what Avneer is doing, is you start to surface the unseen or typically under leveraged client relationships that can deliver that differentiation, that can really set you apart. Said another way, how do I tap into net new opportunities from relationships I already have? I believe we're all struggling with something I call new logo-itis. Everybody wants to chase net new at the expense, at the cost of relationships you already have. People who know you, like you, trust you, have had a good experience with you. And if you want to get even more technical, the customer acquisition cost, the CAC of an existing relationship is near zero because you're already a known entity. So revisiting those that are certainly familiar with your unique value add, we believe can absolutely set you apart. Again, as a reminder, we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, X. I would encourage you jump in with questions, comments, anything that that you believe would be of greater value to the broader audience that's joined us as well. So moving on to strategic AI governance and capability building. Make no mistake about it, with AI proliferation, if we don't put in guardrails, AI starts to become a liability. So if you think about clients who are adopting AI, there are a lot of tools, right? There's no shortage of tools. I just got back from a venture summit in New York City, and hundreds of companies pitching an AI point solution, AI tool. The problem is, if you don't have strategies, business outcomes, how does this fit into our strategic growth? How does this fit into our market penetration? How does this fit into attracting, retaining, developing 10x talent? You probably also you may not have AI guardrails or internal capabilities to embed AI safely. A lot of these executives who are telling me their AI pilots are failing are pointing to bad data, incomplete data. So what we're doing is we're automating garbage. And what I'm getting from my AI platform has little to no value because the underlying data is not really useful. So if you think about risk management, if you think of ethics, if you think about aligning client expectations, data governance, and internal training, you dramatically set up those AI pilots, AI initiatives to succeed. So what does good AI governance look like? Ethics. We cannot get away from this. Transparency. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What data is the AI model looking at? Disclosure. Accountability. Who owns this? Where does this go? Who gets to see it? Right? One of the big name CRM companies bought for a very hefty price someone that's in our space, and they had to write off about a $400 million acquisition because it didn't comply with GDPR. And if you're a global company and that data privacy and data security isn't innately built into the platform, you're going to run into issues. So in building internal AI literacy, how do you effectively champion, right? When there's a constant battle for budgets, how do you champion an AI initiative? How do you build peer learning? How do you develop sense making across the firm? Because if we keep doing AI pilots initiatives in these silos, in these buckets, and somebody isn't looking across the board of how do those little pilots or small pilots could create scale, gain momentum company-wide, it's a missed opportunity. And how do you ensure people understand limitations of AI? I got to tell you, I'm talking to clients and prospects and partners on a daily basis. Everybody loves the idea of AI. They have no idea what it takes. to get the right data, train the models, have it still hallucinate, even with RAG libraries, and still add value. It has enormous amount of potential. But if you don't understand limitations and trade-offs, again, you're setting yourself up for failure. And then AI, obviously, something we're passionate about, AI and relationship mapping. How do I extract relational insights that are not found in org charts, that are not found in Slack or some company directory, right? How do I dramatically elevate our proposal efficacy? How do I elevate our client care? How do I improve the reliability and client trust in those interactions? We believe these are all strategic AI governance and capability building opportunities. And the third bucket is the idea of revenue resilience, right? In an uncertain economy, we believe thinking differently about your revenue growth is more important than ever. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a whole bunch of enterprise clients that are tightening their budgets. I've got a whole bunch of clients that are either delaying or they've got stalled projects, which, by the way, creates chaos. But if you got elongated sales cycles, that means more firms need to create a more resilient revenue models. Think about recurring, think about retain, think about outcome-based work. It deepens the relationship. If you deepen the relationship, not always, and it's never a guarantee, but often it cushions the downturn. So the opportunity becomes, how do we restructure our proposals, our engagements for more of that shared risk or outcome-based fees? Every client I know is willing to, right? If they benefit 10x from the value you bring, they're willing to share that. So what does that look like? How do you use relationship intelligence to identify which client relationships are sticky versus others we call flight risk? Clients don't leave overnight. It's a declining level of engagement that says I'm no longer getting value from these guys and or I've got other alternative options. How do you then prioritize and nurture to retain those relationships? But you also, I don't know of a business that doesn't need net new business. So how do you balance that with hunting for new? What you do have to do is strategize to maintain or grow those relationships in lean times. So how do I cross-sell? How do I expand within existing accounts? We're huge believers of land and expand. If I build and nurture a relationship with one buyer in that account, are there other buyers for the same service and or my broader portfolio of services? How do I increase revenue via offerings that are tied to, much more so than ever before, cost savings, risk mitigation, new regulations? So the more I can tie the value that I bring to how is that client better off because of me, the more valuable I become. And again, this is back to the EPSTA. Look at this. Top performers engage key stakeholders, key relationships much earlier in the process. The deals you win on the left-hand side, their relationships are much more involved and engaged earlier. The deals you lose, you don't have them as engaged. That's why we deeply believe in this idea of intelligent relationship management, whereas traditionally, and even today, our current CRM, there's a system of record. We put stuff in, there's a predictive model, we get stuff out. What we're trying to do is truly through AI orchestration, think of a library of AI agents in the middle that intelligently bring not just structured, but unstructured data in, help you make sense of it, and then present what we call intelligent call to action. These are the steps to further nurture a deeper relationship with Patrick or Eric or Tom. These are my top relationships that should be critical to my success. So in a very clean environment, very straightforward UI, if you will, imagine a dashboard that says, hey, welcome back, Pete. Here's the, today's meetings, the key things you need to focus on in your unresolved issues, whether it's a commitment or a meeting or a signal, what you need to act on. If it's integrated with my calendar, most of us live by our calendars. By the way, there's a gap where you could work on your commitments. Show me a clean, updated, enriched, prioritized set of relationships where I can see how long have I known someone? I'm baffled by the LinkedIns of the world that cannot tell me how long I've known someone, how do I know someone, how relevant are they to my world. But what about if they're a top contact? What about your next meeting? If there's not a next meeting on there, that should be a yellow flag. How many open commitments? How often do we make commitments to our relationships and good intentions, but they fall through the cracks? And then more importantly, is there a relationship score? Are there things that I need to work on? So as I open up that profile, right, not just descriptive information, here's the relationship status, here's the relationship goals, but what about prescriptive? Here's the next best actions. And again, with GDPR at its core, I'm not going to show you who Pete knows, but I can show you based on your goals, here are the relationships that are most impactful in what Pete can bring to the table. So as I mentioned, we've designed 15 AI agents. We've deployed a few that are proactively thinking about, nurturing, looking to enhance and update how you interact, how you engage. And we're making 6 bets in our current beta. We're very much still in the early access partner program. And these bets are, how do I get warm introductions from people I know to the people I need to get to know? How do I get relationship signals and nudges? We see this all the time. Pete's just joined the new company. What do we do on LinkedIn? Give him a thumbs up. Who cares about a thumbs up? Why not give me something more contextually relevant that I can use to reach out to Pete and say, A, it's been entirely too long since we've connected. B, I read up on your company. It sounds exciting. Let's catch up one-on-one once you figure out where the coffee is. So if I can proactively nurture that movement, that will dramatically help my relationship building. Of course, this next example would never happen where David Noor didn't reply for 90 days. But again, good people, good intentions, we all get busy. So if a relationship doesn't engage for some period of time, why not let me prompt you, nudge you to reconnect with value add? This idea of network visualization or coverage map. Who do I know in that existing account? By the way, red flags. Who don't I know? I don't have any C-suite at that relationships. Magellan is our built-in in-app guide. In essence, think of it as a relationship coach that tells you not just why Emily's important, but here's how to strengthen that relationship with Emily. And last but not least, I commented that CRMs have forgotten the R. I don't want to compete with any of them. And I certainly don't want to be the next version. What I want to do is ingest from these sources. Let me add our relationship insights that I'm happy to write back. I'm happy to embed this back into wherever your workflow is. So what's next with us? Well, Jolie Gaston on our team has a copy of this presentation. If it would be of value to you, just email Jolie and she can get you a copy of this. We have several breakfast series coming up on this same topic. We're going to be in Atlanta. If you're in Atlanta, we have 2 coming up. One is in Buckhead on September 25th. We'll do one up in Alpharetta on October 10th. You can learn more about those, avneer.com, lowercase RRA. Revenues, relationships, and AI. We're also have a presence in New York, so we're going to do one in Manhattan on October 7th. If you just add an NY in front of that, that's a good opportunity to join us for the New York one. We're going to announce more dates and locations in 26, and we're actually partnering with consulting firm clients, and we're inviting corporate guests. I think it's always really important to hear from corporate buyers of this, of how they're thinking differently. The other thing I would really encourage you to think about is we have our Relationship Economics Summit coming up. I mentioned it earlier. It is the front end of that week is our Next Up Leadership program. And Jolie's kind enough to share comments in the, so there you go. There's the for Atlanta, avneer.com/RRA. For our friends in New York, just add an NY in front of that, NYRRA. Our Relationship Economics Summit, especially the Next Up Leadership Program, is October 13th through 15th in a beautiful place called Julep Farm. So if you go to avneer.com/res for Relationship Economics Summit -NU for Next Up, you can learn more about that. If this gives you a glimpse into what we're doing, come join us for a couple of days of additional insights in that program that we think will be particularly valuable. In terms of us and the platform, as I mentioned, we have an early access partner program where you get a chance to influence the roadmap, really gain a first mover advantage. We've got a dedicated onboarding and support team. We've built something called Avenir University, where it's all kind of videos and download PDFs of my work. And then we're also optionally offering 90 days of group relationship economics coaching. There's a license, Avenir University and coaching, a very simple beta agreement. And then we do something we call chair sit or value engineering. And those are just some of the folks that are currently in our early access or beta partner program. But we learn a lot about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and how can we really identify value in your efforts. So there's my contact info. If there's anything my team and I can do to help you, I hope you'll reach out. I hope this has been of interest and value to you. We're going to continue to do these. I think I've got late October as the next virtual session. But as I mentioned, the breakfast series are coming up as our summit, and highly recommend, again, sign up, come join us for breakfast and a couple hours of much more hands-on, much more interactive sessions on these topics in person. On behalf of the Avenir team, I'm David Noor. Thanks for joining us. I hope this session has been of interest and value to you, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming sessions. Thanks, everybody. Make it a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.